again. Okay. So good morning, staff, and welcome to the meeting about reopening of schools. And there's been a lot of work put into thinking through this. We don't have maybe every answer today. We have a lot of them. Thought through a lot of the different details. I want to share that with you today. We have on the call the 5 principals. Of course, we've had an exciting summer. The middle school hired Brian Wheeler, and Perryville hired Jenna Blair. And so they're on the call, as well as Mark Wade, Pam Shunk, and Bernice Bates. I also have with us, I'm not sure if Nicole Brown has made it. Susan, is she on the call? Maybe not yet. We have Kyle Wynn, Amy Bugg, and Stephanie Wade. Amy Bugg is the new communications director for the district. And she and Stephanie Wade will handle your questions at the end once we get through the slide deck here. And then Carla Carr for Human Resources is on the call as well. And so all of those folks can help answer questions that you may have as we work our way through it. You know, one thing that struck me is this is going to be a difficult year. I think we all appreciate that fact, and it's that's kind of an obvious statement there. It's going to be a tough year. But I have been struck by the positivity of your principals. When I talk to the 5 principals about the year, it's not that they don't see the challenges ahead, but they see opportunities. They see a lot of positive things. And so what I thought I would do is today, as we go through this, is just let each of them talk to you for a minute. Give them a few seconds just to say what they kind of, how they're processing what we're getting ready to do. And so I'm going to begin that with Mark Wade. I may sprinkle them in throughout the presentation today, but we'll begin with Mark Wade. So I'll give Mark a few seconds to talk to all of our staff.
Well, good morning. You caught me off guard, but that's okay. I'm excited about the school year. I think it's an opportunity for us to really work hard and come close to each other. We definitely have a lot to accomplish, and we really had to rethink school in general from, I guess, March of last school year all the way through graduation to scheduling students to the beginning of school. And so it's all been a huge curveball. And so, I think that we are going to make some decisions now with the best data that we have. But this is the first pandemic that I've been through. And so we will have to adjust at times in order to do what's best for our students and our staff. We've got a whole lot to consider, all the way from, arriving at school to what class change looks like, to what the classroom looks like. I mean, we measured a classroom the other day as far as, I think it was Miss Tiller's room and Mr. Cox's room. They're 2 pretty identical room sizes, which is the typical room of the high school. And in order to proceed at the time, the recommendation was if you could achieve 6 foot of social distancing, then we could have 17 students in that classroom. And I know and that's with no teacher's desk, that's with students' desk, all the way up against the whiteboard. And so, what we made the quick decision that we would highly, that we would very much recommend that in every venue that we would wear masks. And that's kind of what we heard, a resounding recommendation from the governor yesterday. And it's not whether we agree with it or not. I'm not a health professional. And so I'm going to do what's recommended because I want to be a team player. It will be frustrating to wear the mask, and I'm going to experiment with a couple of different ones to see which ones best fit my need. And we will have issues, but I just want to encourage all of my staff and everyone throughout the district to just be team players and really do what's best for our students.
Mark, thank you for that. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I talk to them. It's just, as trying as it's going to be, the positivity there. And maybe we'll do one more, and then like I said, we'll get to all 5 principles before we finish up today. But Pam Shunk, you got a few words for us before we get started?
Hi, everybody. I agree with Mark. I've been up to school a lot lately and, trying to think through what all this is going to look like, especially with 4 and 5-year-olds. Um, and it's going to be a challenge, but I think one thing that the teachers and staff members in our district have proven time and time again is that we welcome challenges and we always find a way to overcome them. And I think that we will do the same here. I am really excited personally to get back to school and see all my staff members and especially our children. And I think we'll figure it all out. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to be an easy road, but I feel like, truthfully, with every problem, there are multiple solutions. So we'll all figure it out.
That's well said, Pam. Well, let's get started with the slide deck here, and so we'll work our way through it. So here's the plan. The board voted on this a couple of nights ago. It's called the synchronous hybrid. That's what KDE is calling it. There'll be a physical school option with a virtual school option. And we'll talk more about how students will identify which one of these two they're participating in, and then how those two options play out as the school year progresses. Lots of details on all this are to come. As far as the calendar, I think you all maybe know, the board voted to make a calendar adjustment as well. To start school on August 26th. We asked for some feedback on that, mostly got positive feedback, did not do it through a survey. It was more informal. Most districts in Kentucky, honestly, are doing the very thing we're doing. I talk to lots of different superintendents daily, and I know of very few who aren't doing this late start. Fall break has been shortened, and we based that on the data. So when we looked at the data from parents, staff, students, and the community, you see that they weren't in favor of eliminating fall break, but shortening. The data says that 40% said yes to that. Only 32% said no, and 26% said maybe that should be considered. So we took that as an opportunity to recapture a couple of days. One thing we wanted to do is keep the last day of school the same. And we were able to do that by shortening fall break. The instructional days will be 165. Now, here's how that works. The bill, I call it the boat dock bill. Susan Taylor, what's the actual name of that bill?
It's called the variable calendar.
Variable calendar. I think people call it boat dock because it was set up to increase tourism. Years ago, I don't know how 5, 6, 7 years ago, it's been an option. People haven't taken advantage of it. This is the first year. Obviously, the big reason to do it this year is for the planning. Give us more time to plan, give you more time to plan. And, also to learn a little bit more about what we're up against. Some states will have schools opening up. We'll watch that. A few districts in Kentucky will open up before us. We'll learn that. But the way the 165 works is if you look at the calendar, it allows teachers to not make up 5 days. So they'll get credit. You'll get credit for 170 days, although only 165 instructional days. Now, the beauty of that is, we're going to talk about just in a minute. We're going to ask staff to come in 15 minutes earlier because kids, according to the guidance, have to go straight to the classroom, not to the lobby, not to the gym, not to the cafeteria, straight to the classroom. And so to do that, we need teachers to arrive 15 minutes earlier. So that's the purpose of the reason that they kind of let you write off days. And in this example, 5 days, is because they know that when you do a calendar like this, sometimes you have to add minutes here or there. We're not adding minutes to the actual day. We are asking teachers to come in 15 minutes earlier and students to go straight back to the classroom. Classified employees are handled very similarly. The bill doesn't say, though, that you get to give them credit for 170 days if they work fewer, and in this case, 165. What it says is they're only held accountable for the number of hours, the total number of hours in the school year that they're contracted for. So you'll work with your principal to establish how many hours you've been contracted for, and then how that plays out for you on a daily basis. Carla Carr could be helpful to you on that as well. So I think it's a real pro staff move to make this decision. Gives you more time to plan, gives you more flexibility. It rewards you for coming in 15 minutes earlier by not having to make up 5 of those instructional days. It's a pro staff plan. and it's a pretty logical one based on what we're up against. If you have questions about the calendar, again, we're going to take questions at the end, and I'll answer any of those that you have to the best of my ability. So this is the physical school option. So we wanted to kind of show you the things that have to happen. And a lot of this, so just so you know, the state of Kentucky, the governor's office, the state health officials have come up with a document, and that may be the next thing that's on here. Susan, let's go to the next slide. It is, yes. And it has, the document has expectations and best practices. And I don't know, we probably won't try to go into the document today. I'm sure the staff members have seen it. But if it says expectations, our board attorney told me to consider those laws. You have to do them. They're not negotiable. If there was a lawsuit in the district, hopefully there will not be one, but you will be held accountable for, did you fulfill the expectations? Best practices, you can choose to do them or not. So when you read the document, know that if it's an expectation, you have to do it. And most of the information we're going to go through with you next are expectations in that state document. So every district in Kentucky is going to be held to the same standard we are. They're going to have to follow those expectations. I mentioned that we'll have staff arrive 15 minutes earlier. So here is the time that we want staff to arrive. You see that Perryville, the arrival will be 7:20 for staff. Kids, as they make their way into the building, will go straight back to their classroom. Ms. Blair will work with you on exactly the procedures to make that happen. Junction City is also 7:20 for staff. Woodlawn will be 7:35. Woodlawn now is the middle rotation on campus for buses because the middle school is now first. That's just the way the bus loop, so to speak, is going to work. So the middle school staff will get there at 7:30. The high school staff at 7:35. Dismissal has not changed, and the amount of time you have to stay after dismissal has not changed. The only thing that's changed here is the time we ask you to come to work. You all probably know temperature checks. We bought already 90 thermometers. We'll end up with more than that before it's over with, but your school will give your school a bunch of them. We'll check temperatures as the students walk in the building. Now, getting on the bus, interestingly enough, the parent can, and we still got to work out exactly how this is going to play out, but the parent can testify or have some kind of document they sign that they've checked their child's temperature before they get on the bus. And that may be how we do that. But then when they get to the building, we will actually check the temperature. The bus part's still a little bit up in the air for us, but that is something we can do for the bus. Can't do that at the school level. You have to check it as they walk in the door. And of course, 100.4 is the reading that you're wanting to avoid. You have to take action at 100.4, and we'll have to document that for our local health department, any student who is 100.4 or higher every day. And that is a big key. Britt Blevins has been great to work with and has helped us a great deal. And you also have to follow the guidance from your local health department, which Brent's great to work with anyway. So it's been great. Mark Wade mentioned social distancing, and it is 6 feet, must be utilized at all times. The basic rule is in your classroom, like he mentioned, a classroom had 17 students in it. So if at the high school you had a class, a small class of some sort, there aren't many of those that happen, but if you had one and there were fewer than 17 students, the students could come in, get seated, be 6 feet away from each other, and they could take their masks off. If, however, you cannot achieve 6 feet of social distancing, students and staff have to leave their mask on. The other time that you have to always wear masks is anytime you move. Anytime a staff member moves, so I'm talking about moving in the hallway, moving about the building, anytime students move in the hallway and about the building. Here are the masks. And of course, that's been a contentious item. And I think maybe in the beginning, we were told that they didn't make a difference back in March. We weren't advised to buy them. We weren't advised to wear them. And then the data started coming in that it's, I saw some data that said that if you spend some time with a person and you don't have the proper social distancing, the likelihood that you would get it is like 70-75%. COVID-19 I'm speaking of. But if you have a mask on, that drops to 17%. So the data has changed over time on this. And of course, you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting others. Like yesterday, I think it was, or day before, the governor came out with a mandate, starts, I think, today at 5 o'clock, that you have to wear masks in our community. And of course, in his guidance document, this is an expectation. So it's a law for us that students and staff will wear masks when 6 feet social distancing is not achieved. You know, we're still trying to pull off extracurriculars. I watched some football practice last night just for a few minutes to see how things were going. So we're practicing, and Kyle Wynn's on the call if you have questions about that at the end. We want to allow spectators to watch games, but everything to do with athletics will be guided by the KHSAA in terms of student participation, in terms of spectators. I was on a call with Julian Tackett on Tuesday of this week, and he said his goal is to be 50% capacity. Right now, if we had a game, it would be 50 people could view the game. So 50 people total at the venue. So that would be very few spectators, if any. But his goal is to get to 50% capacity, and he felt pretty confident he'd be able to pull that off. We also plan to expand BCSN, which is our student group led by Michelle Feistrecher. And they live streamed some games for us last year. I've talked to Michelle about, can we increase that to a second group? And Brian Wheeler said, hey, I'd like to have a group of students at the middle school doing that as well. So we could be live streaming quite a few games this year, which I think would be great. We will have to teach our students. You have questions about that at the end. We want to. A little feedback there. Sorry about that. We will have to teach our students about these safety procedures related to COVID-19. You can see those listed there. And we'll work on some curriculum for you as you work through this with your students. Transportation, I've already talked about a little bit. They changed the regulations. At one time, you had to sit students every other seat, which would have been possible. Now you can sit them on every seat of the bus. Of course, the buses have high seat backs, so that makes sense to me that we'd be able to do that. We are going to encourage students and families to drop off more than maybe in the past, but we're going to give them the option of the bus. They have to wear masks on the bus. We want to sit them with their siblings and only sit them with someone else when we have to from another family. But the guidance document does allow us to do that if we have to. So, all the guidelines that apply to the school will also apply to transportation. And I mentioned that they have to wear masks at all times. The big thing for us is there's going to be a survey that will be open today after our 4 o'clock town hall with parents. And in that survey that's due July 24th, they're going to tell us if they're physical school or virtual school. They're going to tell us if they need to use the bus. They're going to tell us if they have internet access issues. And all these other things that we need to know. And so by July 24th, we'll have a very clear picture of what our students will be doing. Today, we don't know how many kids are going to be riding the bus this year, right? We're going to encourage more drop-offs, but we don't know the answer to that yet. Of course, buses will be cleaned after each route. Also, we will deep clean our school buildings. If you're a custodian on the call, that makes a big difference, because the coronavirus versus the flu, even, it hangs around on surface tops longer. And so us deep cleaning the building in a real specific way is going to be very important. Other staff in the building may be asked during class change in schools that are doing that. We've encouraged schools to think about ways to not class change as much. But if you're having to use class change, we will have to clean off the surfaces of the desks before the next group of students come in. And we'll have to have all hands on deck for that. So what happens if a student or a staff member is symptomatic of COVID-19? We'll send them home. And that goes for me and my people at central office and every staff member in our buildings and bus garages, all of us, if we're showing symptoms, we need to go home. In order to return to school, there's some kind of documentation that will be needed by a medical provider. We may provide testing at some point ourselves, but we're not set up to do that at the moment. Now, the document does say it's a best practice to test 10% of your staff weekly. Not an expectation, so we don't have to do that, but we're discussing whether or not we will try to do that at some point. A lot of people have questions about quarantine. How's that going to work? When will I be quarantined? And so, the health department will guide those decisions. So we'll say if we have a student in one of our schools who has the coronavirus, they will contact Trace and make a determination of who all needs to be quarantined and how long, and we'll follow that guidance. Now, the question I've heard is, well, will teachers have to burn sick days? They're not sick themselves. They just have to be quarantined. And I will say my goal is to be fair to people, right? I want to be fair to people. And, we don't have any clear guidance on that yet, but, just know that we're going to approach the year that we're going to be very fair to our staff, just as we were last spring. If you were in the district last spring, you know that I think we were very fair to people, and we're going to do that again. So, if that happens to you, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. After we've dealt with it a time or two, we'll know exactly how to, but we're going to approach every decision on being very fair to our staff. Shelter in place orders. So I'm here, we're talking today, July 10th, about what we're planning to do, but quite frankly, we could get an order from the governor before school starts to shelter in place. And if that happens, that's what we're going to do. We could also get one from the Boyle County Health Department. Maybe the entire state of Kentucky's numbers haven't gone up, but they are in Danville, Boyle County, and they say you need to shelter in place. Well, then we would do that. Also, the district, we could say, the attendance is so low that the instructional environment's not optimal. And so we could just decide ourselves to shelter in place for a period of time. So any of those things could happen. What we're presenting to you today is what we plan to do August 26th. And short of something changing, and the Kentucky's case count is going up. But nonetheless, this is the plan as of today. And when we do shelter in place, obviously NTI and virtual instruction will be how we would do it. I will tell you, we did a great job, I thought, in the spring, but parents felt there was still a burden, on them. And I'm certain there was a burden on them, a burden on all of us. I mean, all of us, our lives were changed drastically, and it was a burden. We want to move in a case of shelter in place as close to virtual instruction as we can, because we think it connects the staff to the kids more closely and removes the parent from feeling like they're in some kind of an instructional role themselves. So that's the goal. I think we got very close to that in the spring. And if we have to shelter in place this year, we'll try to get even closer to that. I'm going to stop here for just a second before we get into what the virtual school is going to look like. And I'm going to let Bernice Bates. Bernice, tell us, Bernice has been one of them that's been, although she sees the obstacles, she's been very positive about the school year. So Bernice, speak to us for just a minute.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to echo what Mark and Pam said, that, none of us have been through a pandemic. So this is, first for all of us. But I would like to say across Boyle County, what I saw from not just the teachers, but our classified staff and everybody, the maintenance workers, custodians, bus drivers, everybody stepped up and did what was best, for kids. And I know that, as Pam said, we will have challenges. Our goal is to make sure that not only our kids, but our staff is safe as well, and that we provide a quality education. And I was very, very, very proud to be a Boyle County employee, because I saw so many people some of us stepped outside of our comfort zones, and some of us just took what we did and we really made a very difficult situation workable for our students and our families. Even though we can get better, I think that we did a great, great job. I heard that across the board from many parents. But we'll get through this together. Andy Bashir's thing, but I truly believe that when we have adversity in Boyle County, we step up to the plate and we knock it out of the ballpark and we do what's best for kids. So I'm certain that while many of you have lots of questions, I'm watching the live chat as we go along. We'll have some of those answers, and if we don't have the answer, be patient, because as everyone across the nation, as everyone across the globe, as things happen, we have to build a plan, and we want to make sure that that's the best plan that keeps everyone safe. So I know that we'll do a great job, as we always do, and we'll be patient and we'll be caring as always. So everybody still stay safe, and we'll when we know more plans, we'll get those out to you guys.
That's well said, Bernice. Thank you for that. So we're going to get into the virtual school option now. And the first slide talks about what we want it to look like. So if you're a staff member working in the virtual school, and we'll talk about who those staff members might be in a minute, this is what we want the instruction to look like. And the key word there is we want to mirror the physical school in terms of curriculum, assessment, pacing, and pedagogical approach. So we want it to feel like, as close as possible, that the students attending the physical school building. Obviously a high priority on removing barriers. Students will meet the teachers during regular school hours. So it's going to actually mirror, not just in terms of the pedagogical approach and assessments and pacing, but also in terms of the actual hours. Obviously, technological tools will be used, and we'll make sure the student has an iPad or Chromebook. We're already one-to-one down to second grade, and we're working on getting that down to kindergarten. I don't know if we'll get there by school start, but we're getting close. And then if there's an internet access issue for our students, we'll be able to bridge that gap. We were hoping to be able to do that for staff, but the cost is pretty substantial at the moment. So if you're someone maybe interested in doing that, know that we may have a hard time doing that for as many people as we want to. But obviously for students, we're going to have to. So here's a little bit about enrollment. Enrollment into the virtual school is a choice that any student in the district can pursue. The reason our thinking behind that is that, we believe that the job we do in Boyle County is, quite frankly, as good as a student can get in Kentucky, and I think in the nation. So we want them with us rather than doing homeschool. That's what we want. We want to make that available to them. Our fear is that if we say you have to have a pre-existing condition or something like that, we'll have some families choose homeschool. Quite a few, we're afraid. And we think we can really educate the child at a higher level, to be honest. And so that's why we're taking that position. The virtual school will be divided into 2 semesters. Attendance and participation will be monitored daily. So that's the difference between what we did in the spring as well, is because it mirrors the regular day, there will be daily attendance. Now, KDE's focus this year is on participation, not attendance. And so ours will be that as well. Now you see the first semester is August 26th to December 18, and the commitment date is July 24th. And so a parent will have to tell us by that date if they're going to opt into the virtual school. And then they'll be in that school for a semester. And then you can see the second semester there as well. So as far as re-enrollment, if the parent does not notify us by the date, we're assuming they want to be re-enrolled in whatever situation they're in. So they're in the physical school, we're going to re-enroll them essentially in that. They're in the virtual school, we're going to re-enroll them in that. They can make a request to transfer in the middle of a semester, but it requires administrative approval. So if it's a middle school student making that request, you got to have Brian Wheeler's approval. The central office point of contact will be Chris Sloan. You got to have both of them to approve in the middle of a semester for a transfer. At those commitment dates, though, the parent controls their own destiny with the child. So by July 24th, it's a decision the parent and the child make. However, if you say I'm going physical school and then you get into September, I want to go virtual school, you've got to have the principal and the district contact to approve that. We will have students and parents sign a contract speaking to completing assignments, speaking to the level of commitment that the child needs to have. They will, however, be able to participate in extracurricular activities. That's KHSAA. If your virtual school is an A1, which we debated that and decided all of ours would be, A1 means that it rides along beside of the physical school building. So Woodlawn will have an A1, and Junction will have an A1, and the middle school, et cetera. They'll all have A1 virtual schools that are connected to them. An A5 is when you separate it into a new school. You essentially create a brand new school. So you can imagine, just take ACT, for example. We would have ACT scores for our virtual school over here, and the high school would have their own, and then the district would have a number that combines the two. So there's just a lot of complications to creating A5s. I just named one of them there, but there's many others. And so we thought it best to maintain A1s for the virtual school, which means that, according to KHSAA, you have to allow the students to participate in extracurricular activities. The schedule will mirror the start and end times of the physical school. We talked about that. I was hitting that hard because we want everybody to understand that. Meals for students in the virtual school will be provided, and there'll be a commitment form to that too. By July 24th, they'll let us know they need that, and we'll deliver to the people who need them. We're going to deliver not to their homes, though. It'll be to 4 or 5 locations in the community, and then the parents will come pick up most likely a full week worth of meals at a time. So obviously, Boyle County Schools, gap reduction and just making sure every child's in a good situation is kind of what we do best. We do a lot of things well, but that's maybe number one. And we'll continue with our exceptional child services, academic support, speech therapy, counseling, including, though, I would say AP classes. And we may have to handle AP classes a little bit differently. I think the next slide speaks to that. And those will be live streamed. We're trying to not just simply live stream every classroom. That's not what we're trying to pull off. We want the feel of the virtual school to be a little more intimate than that, a little more closely connected, where the teacher, that's their students. We want to create situations where it's like that. It's not like I've got these 24 students over here I'm teaching. Oh, by the way, there's 3 watching me, and I'll try to get to them if I can get to them later. We're not trying to pull that off. What we're trying to pull off is, if you're working the virtual academy, if we can, and we'll see the numbers to know if we can do this, we want, a teacher to have a period where that's what they're doing, is the virtual school. And so the connection's tighter. But AP, I think we'll have to live stream, dual credit. A few of these others you see will have to be live streamed. Now, before we get to additional information, I'm going to stop here and let Jenna Blair. So Jenna's new to Perryville, and I sense the staff there are very excited about having her there. So I'll let Jenna talk about the upcoming school year.
I just want to really start off by saying, I'm honored and humbled to be able to join the staff at Perryville Elementary this year. I'm thankful. I'm really looking forward to continuing to build on the relationships. We have a dynamic staff, and we have a close-knit community that's extremely supportive, and we have great parents that are dedicated. And I also want to say that, I know this year is crucial, like any year, in the education of our students. And I know that we will have challenges and we will have obstacles that we will have to face. But I was in a different seat at central office. I was not in the principal seat this past year. And I saw within 48 hours, we said we have to go virtual. And without a doubt in my mind, I knew that our staff would be able to pull this off and be able to make a difference with our students. And you all did. You all were positive. You had positive attitudes. You worked over the weekend. You worked long hours, and we were able to provide an education to our students in the same way that we would in any other situation. You all always seem to rise to the top. And, most importantly, I know that our staff at Perryville and the entire district will be able to work as a team to provide that safe and loving and caring and positive environment for our students where they can continue to thrive and learn and grow. And I will say without a doubt that our district and our team at Perryville and our schools individually will work on a plan that best meets the needs of their staff and their students and their parents. And we will work together, and we will have a great year with positive attitudes. And I know that no matter what the challenges we face, we will work as a team to overcome those.
That's well said, Jenna. Thank you for that. So we'll work our way through some additional information here. So, we talked about the big due date, July 24th. All families need to complete back to school forms, virtual or physical school commitment, transportation preferences, food service needs requests. There's other things, but that's a big date. It's a survey that gives us all that information. And we have to have every single family fill it out, And it's going to be fairly complicated because they may have one child who needs to do this, and then these other two are going to do this. So it's going to be pretty complicated to sort through all that, but that has to be done in the next 2 weeks. So back to school events, I think they'll probably look different. I would assume, we wouldn't try to probably pull that off prior to the beginning of school. I would think, do some kind of virtual video tours. I don't know. Your schools will come up with something creative. I'm confident of that, but I think that looks different. And of course, here's the contact information. All schools will be open to the public 8:30 to 3:30 daily on August 3rd, as well as central office. We will be as well. We'll have someone at central office every day, but we're working virtually during the month of August. And quite frankly, the reason is just because I want us to get off to a great start. We've got people taking vacations right now. I encourage them to do that. But when you do that, of course, you put yourself a little bit more at risk. And so if you came right back into an office, you're putting the office at risk. So we'll want to get your vacations out of the way. We'll work virtually on August 3rd. We'll come back together, and I want us all to be healthy. I want you on the call to be healthy. I want my office to be healthy. I want us to be able to come out of the gates strong and make a go at this and see what we can do. And so I think that's an important part of it. So August 3rd is the date for the opening of schools in terms of to the public in the central office. So now we're getting into some ideas about the staff. And so before we do that, I'm gonna let Brian Wheeler's last up. So Brian Wheeler, and I know the middle school also excited about having Brian Wheeler on board. So Brian, talk to us about the school year real quick.
Well, first of all, thanks, Mike. I'm excited about, the new opportunity, excited about being the new principal, especially going in a new building. I've been there a lot. The spaces are amazing. And we're set up to be able to pull off a lot of social distancing physically in our building because of the space, the sizes of a lot of the spaces that we have. As I walk through, I almost have to pinch myself to see all the great things that we can do for students in that new building. But our mindset will be critical this year. I've talked to a lot of teachers after they finished up all the virtual learning in the spring, and a lot of teachers talked about what they learned. And how much better they can do or how much better they can be at certain things. So that's just the way that we do it. And that's the way our staff works. There's a challenge, they figure things out, and they learn new things and they grow. So I'm excited to see how we apply some of that as we come back into school. And just a new challenge is just a chance for us to get even better at our craft of teaching kids. So once again, just excited about being a principal at the middle school and excited about what new things we can learn as we face a new challenge.
Thank you, Brian. Brian and Jenna, start your career as a head principal this way is interesting for sure, but they're set up to do it. I also mentioned Bobby Lefew. I don't think Bobby's on the call, but he principal at the alternative school and also a real positive person. And I think they've got a new space this year, and I think he's excited about the year. So we're happy for him and his team as well. All right, so the staff, here's some details just for you that we won't show this afternoon to the parents, but these are just for you to see. So we talked about, in the guidance document that the students are being asked to go straight to their homeroom, and that's why we're asking teachers to be at school 30 minutes earlier. We actually changed the policy for 1 year that allows that, because the policy used to say 15 minutes. We changed that policy. Of course, we changed the calendar, which gave you 5 days. And we simply took those 5 days and scattered those days out across the entire year, which got us to 15 minutes. You may be asked by your principal to do temperature checks and other things. I don't know what all the principal may need you to do. So one of the principals said all hands on deck, or we're kind of, whatever it takes. And that's kind of how the year is going to be. We're just going to have to be ready to do what's necessary. So don't be surprised if your principal comes to you and says, I need you to do some temperature checks for me. It could happen. Professional development, of course, we moved that window to the August 10 through 19. And, there will be some training specific to this situation, to COVID-19, to how you function. We're going to spend some time on that, just those practices and procedures. And then, of course, some of the PD I'm certain will be about instructional items that also will reduce gaps from the spring, but then also help pivot us towards what's necessary for the school year. All that's going to be in the PD. It's going to be in a unique PD window and a unique PD experience because it needs to be so specific to this school year. But the 2021 PD will be set up by your principal, and they'll make you aware of exactly what dates you're meeting and what's going to happen. The virtual school will be staffed primarily with certified staff. I think that's how that's going to work out. So if you had that question, that's how that will work. Some staff will work all day in the virtual school is how I think it will occur. Now, the only way that wouldn't be the case is if the numbers of the virtual school students is so low, we don't need that. I'm not believing that to be the case. When I'm talking to superintendent friends of mine, we did not survey this question. We chose not to. We thought about it. We just chose not to do it we had some good reasons not to. But what they're hearing is the lowest I've heard is 7% of their student body, and the highest I've heard is 40% when they've surveyed their parents. So, any of those scenarios are a pretty substantial number of students. For us, you're talking about 200 plus kids, right, in a 7% scenario. So, I think some staff will work all day in the virtual school, while other staff may only work a period, as little as one period. All virtual school staff will work in one of the 5 physical buildings. So that's a key. We've had that question asked. Can I work from home? And, starting August 3rd, when people work in the district, they're going to work in a building. We've been sheltering in place. We've all been doing it. We did it in the spring. Everybody did it. We've continued it to some extent. We've had people working in buildings, just not every single day. But on August 3rd, we're going to all work in our physical locations. So if you are a virtual school employee, even if you're one of the ones who work full time in the virtual school, we'll have a spot for you in the building. So we just want you to understand that's how that's going to work. You can apply. It will be some kind of application process after July 24th. So once we know the numbers, we'll create a process where you can apply to participate in that. But you may also have a situation where the principal comes to you and asks you to help. So you can imagine Brian and Mark, they may only need a period of social studies, or a couple periods of math, and they may go to one of the teachers and say, hey, I'd like to rework your schedule to where you're working, 4 periods a day in the physical environment, 1 period a day with our virtual students. That could be asked of you, just so you know. Full-time virtual school staff will not receive additional compensation. The thought behind that is, if you're full-time virtual or full-time physical school, well, that's your job. But if you're one of those hybrids that's having to work in both worlds, we've got to set up to where we can give you a $500 stipend. Now, I don't know that $500 stipend is going to consider every scenario, right? Because we could have a period of time where, we shelter. So you say, well, I was physical school, but then I went into shelter in place. Well, but that was your full-time job. What we're trying to compensate is someone who's having to juggle 2 worlds simultaneously. That's what we're trying to compensate. It's not $500 per period you do it. It's just $500 for having to do it, right? So if you're a person who's being asked to juggle those 2 worlds simultaneously for the entire school year, I'm not talking about a small little window of time. I'm talking about the entire school year. That's what we're trying to compensate. We won't be able to compensate every single scenario that's out there. There's just going to be so many of them. But that one where we ask someone, a math teacher at the middle school to teach 1 period a day in the virtual school, well, that's an extra burden on that person for that school year. And that's what that stipend's about. So Now, we may have staff who say, you know, I really need to take off. I need to, I'm concerned about this. We're not going to ask for a doctor's note. You know, if you have concerns about it, like I said, we're going to take care of our staff. And so if you've got concerns about it, your concerns are our concerns. And you could take leave, either using your sick days or take leave without pay. Leave without pay has to be approved by the board, but we would take that before the board if that's a concern that you have. Now, the federal government, it expires December 31st. They cover you if you have COVID-19 or you're caring for someone at home who has it. And I believe that's 2 weeks of, you know, and I don't know if there's any way you can get that extended, but I think it's 2 weeks and you don't have to use sick days, you get paid. And then we get reimbursed by the federal government for that. So that's specific to you have COVID or someone under your care has COVID, the federal government. But if it's a concern you don't have COVID, you're just concerned about it, either because you have a pre-existing condition or it's just a concern that you have. You still have options, but your options are sick leave or days without pay. And Carla Carr can give you more details on that. That may be it. I think that is it.
That's the end of the presentation.
All right. So now what we're going to do is take questions, and we'll spend 30 minutes on this or something. And Stephanie and Amy Bug are working on those questions. And so they'll shoot them to us. They'll probably ask, they could ask them of me. We've got other people on the call that they could be directed to as well. Carla Carr, I don't know if Nicole Brown made it. Kyle Wynn, obviously, with athletics would go to him. You've got our 5 principals here. So those questions could go to any of those. And I will say to the team I've got with me today, we hadn't talked about this part, but if there's a question, there could be some tough questions coming our way, and if there are, it's nothing wrong with saying we'll get back to you. We may have to get back to some people on some questions that come our way today. So just know that could happen also.
Hey, Mike. So Amy and I are here. What we're going to do, we've kind of grouped these questions thematically, and we're going to start with some human resources questions. Also, just to kind of, to your point, we have made note of all your questions so that if there's something specific we aren't able to answer or you want to elaborate further, we will have record of that. So, but we're going to start with some more HR specific questions, which is kind of what you covered last in your staff information. And Amy Bug, our new creative director, communication director, is going to be asking those. So I think those will be directed to either you or Carla. So I'll let you all decide how you want to chime in. Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hey, Mike. We have a staff member who is immunocompromised and sort of wonders what their options are. I know you touched on that a little bit, but you want to reiterate what their options are?
Hey, Carla, anything you want to add to that?
I think that, our priority is your health and safety, and, every situation is going to be unique, and we certainly don't want to go into any specific details. We want to respect everybody's privacy. So a lot of those things could be worked out directly with your supervisor. But after this call, if you have questions about leave or anything like that, I've got a Google form I'm going to send out, and you can respond to it, and I will follow up with each person personally and address, your concerns and listen to your needs and get you the information you need so we can make good decisions. So I just think that we want to respect those things. If you're afraid of coming to work or think it's best you don't, then we want to help you achieve that. So just watch your email and just fill out the Google form, tell me your phone number, and I'll follow up with each of you personally on those specifics.
Hey, one other thing on that, obviously we'll have to find a replacement for anybody, and that's perfectly understandable, and we're going to do that. But we would ask that you make your decision by July 24th if you can, because we'd like to know on July 24th, we'd like to know what the students are going to do and also what the staff are going to do. So if you could do that for us, I wouldn't say it's a hard deadline for staff, but it is something that would be very beneficial to us if you could do that.
Okay, we had a question about if a staff member has a fall break trip planned and paid for, can they use their personal days the first 3 days since we've shortened fall break?
I have no personal issue with that. I think you run that by the principal. I would say do that as soon as possible, but we changed that. I think Carla, did we change the policy? It used to say you couldn't take it before breaks or something like that. The personal leave before breaks.
That's been changed though.
So yeah, I think it's nicely. You've got 3 personal days if you need to take them. Again, the earlier you let your principal know, and it ultimately is a principal decision, I think, according to policy, not my decision, but I would have no issue with it.
All right. What about classified staff? Do they need to come in 15 minutes early?
Classified staff, as I told you, because we're using that new, I call it the boat dock bill, so excuse me, I can't remember the real name, but we're starting late. They have to adhere to the number of hours that they're contracted for. So they need to sit down with their principal and work out the year. Now, what you can't do is work over 40 hours in a week, but your weeks can be longer in terms of hours than they were supposed to be before this all happened. So you can work, 39.5-hour weeks or whatever. But really it's between you and your evaluator to work that out.
All right. We have a staff member who's concerned, or maybe more than one, if their daycares don't open until 8 o'clock, is there anything we can do for those folks?
I think that's a tough one there. I think you'd have to work with your principal on that. I think my job would be to work with the central office employees who had that issue, right? I would try to find a way that we could work together on that. But I don't think that's my role to step in and say how the 5 schools would function there. I think you need to talk to your principal. Carly, anything you want to add on that one?
I would agree. I think that's a local in-building discussion.
All right, Mike, can you talk a little bit about how opening day for staff will work, how that will be different this year?
We haven't talked about that as a central office team yet. So I'll probably wait until we do, but I think if I remember right, there's at least one more training that's been added by the state government. And so we're getting to the point to where there's so many trainings, we try to, again, do right by our staff. So we try to reward you for the time you're putting into those, which a lot of districts don't. You just have to put that in above and beyond. And I think we're getting to the point to where it's almost like do the trainings and go straight to your school. It's kind of sad, not to be able to get everybody together. But then you've also got this COVID-19 situation where is it even smart to try to bring everybody together? So we haven't worked that out yet. I think you'll get something on that next week. We've got a meeting on Tuesday, and that's on my agenda to talk about. But I kind of laid out for you the idea there, right? So I already kind of talked through the idea of it.
Right. And what about staff members with students in the school system? Is there a way they can do early drop off or are there special arrangements available for them so they can be in their classrooms on time?
We need to make note of that. That's a good thought. So if you've got you've got to be at the high school at, I think it's 7:40, am I right? So and you've got a student that goes to Woodlawn. And so how do you pull all that off? Yeah, so we got to work together on that. So somebody make a note of that. Susan Taylor, you care to make a note of that? And then that probably goes to Steve Karshner's committee. We don't mind to get that to Steve Karshner, Susan Taylor.
I got it.
All right. And then can the board approve COVID emergency days for 2021? If the federal days only last through the end of December, can the board offer additional days if a staff member contracts COVID in the spring?
I think certainly we could look at that if it does expire. I think the federal government's going to extend that. I would think the federal government or the state government would, but we'll be watching for that. And if it doesn't happen, it's something we could take a look at. I wouldn't want us to jump out in front of what I expect the government to do for us. So I think we're just patient. That's going to be done.
All right, so the next several questions are related to kind of safety protocols inside the schools and specifically instruction. So that's kind of the next theme. The first question was about particular types of mask, and will we allow the gator face mask coverings or bandanas? Are either one of those acceptable face coverings?
I saw a study where bandanas are not effective. They're not nearly as effective as a 2-ply mask. So I think I think the principals are going to have to monitor what's going to be allowed there. Might even be up to site-based councils, or maybe we have to have a district approach to what's going to be acceptable. Not only will you have issues with students trying to wear masks that aren't really effective, but then also they're going to want to put logos on them that, may not be acceptable. So all that's going to have to be dealt with at the school level. Mark Wade, you may deal with it more than anybody else. What's your thinking on it today?
I don't know. I think that number one, we want students to be comfortable, because some masks do breathe better than others, but it doesn't mean that they're as effective. So I think that I'll probably talk to Nicole Brown on her thoughts from a medical standpoint, and then we'll just go that route. We do have a specific part of our policy that doesn't allow for bandanas, but that's actually worn on top of the head. So we would allow them if they pass the sniff test with Nicole Brown.
So the staff knows Nicole Brown was named health coordinator for the district. And of course, we all know how talented and knowledgeable she is. So I think it's smart, Mark, to go to her.
And Nicole is on the call, Mike. She was able to join.
Okay, Nicole. Yeah. So talk about face coverings there. I know some are more effective than others.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We got you.
Okay, yes. So I've read similar studies about the bandanas not being as effective as other face coverings. So I think unless, there's some other guidance or information available for now, I think we should steer clear of the bandanas and that type of thing and stick with, a different kind of face covering. Of course, we want them to be as comfortable as possible, and for our students and staff to be able to breathe through those as well, to prevent any other kinds of problems that we may encounter during that time.
As well said, we're going to buy, I think 3,000 to start off with masks. We're about to the finish line on which company we're going to go with. I don't even know which one it is, but I think they're cotton for the breathability factor. But yeah, so we're going to have them. So students don't have one, we're going to have one for them. If staff, if you need one, we've got one for you. So.
Great. Mike, I do think, you and Nicole both mentioned bandanas. I've got the question that's come in again about the gator mask, and those are the masks that cover the face, but they're also go down onto the neck, and they're almost like a giant scrunchie covering for those that grew up in the 80s.
Now I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I don't know the data on those. I would ask Nicole maybe to research that, and then she'll make she'll let folks know if that's, let the principals know if that's going to be allowable. There is a wide disparity in terms of how effective some face coverings are versus others. And, if we're going to do something like this, we ought to at least do the things that work. So I think that one I would ask her to look into for us.
Great. And just from a communication standpoint, Amy had suggested we could put out some examples of face coverings for people, just, kind of like we do school supplies, or those types of things.
That's a good idea.
Also, you, just to reiterate, you mentioned that the district will be providing those to staff and students who may need them.
Correct.
All right, the next one then also kind of goes along with protocols. It's absentees and parent notes. And that has been voiced several times, the need for looking at those policies. Have we considered that about allowing more parent notes?
We talked about it. There's been no decision made on that yet. I'm trying to remember back to some of the committee meetings as to why no decision was made. But I mean, that came up on the town hall with the staff back in May. And so I know we made note of it and had discussion about it. But currently there's been no change there. So Susan, I would say let's get that question to Chris Holdeman and his team to either decide to make those adjustments, or at least, the position as to why not.
Okay, I got it.
All right, the next question is about sick rooms. I think there are teachers concerned that we'll have students who are symptomatic, but we can't get in touch with parents. So Are there any specific facility arrangements that are in the plans?
Nicole Brown, what are you envisioning on that? So we've got more students sick than you can accommodate in the space you have. And I don't know if you don't know the answer to that. I mean, I guess you'd have to work with the principal on how to establish that. What's the thought there?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So actually, our nursing staff is trying to work with our principals to see if we can have an extra room that is, adjacent or close to your regular nursing or health office room that is in your buildings right now. So, we've got to work with our principals and our staff and even our office staff and sort of work through some of the procedures, how we're going to bring kids in and where we're going to put them. But the thought is that we would like to try and have a dedicated room for isolation or for our sick students, as opposed to, bringing our regular students in. We may have to look at something, and some training for teachers and staff regarding what would constitute, sending a student to the health office. If you all think that would be helpful, I can work on that and go from there. And that might be helpful to try and triage or route kids through. But we are trying to work on that at each building to see what resources are available to take care of our students and triage them as they come in.
That's a good answer there.
All right, that is, thank you, Nicole. The next question is again about kind of protocols and facilities. Have we considered getting any plexiglass for teacher lecterns or for the front office?
So, different information on that. Generally speaking, we were advised against that by the state officials. At one point that was thought to be a good idea, but of course, once those are contaminated, then you've got to clean that surface as well. And I think what I've read most recently is those are only good if they're accompanied with a mask. Nicole, is that correct? If you're going to do plexiglass, you also have to have masks worn at all times in those areas.
Yes, correct, as far as I understand it.
So right now, there's no plans to use plexiglass. That's not the direction we're moving towards. What we're trying to do is create social distancing. And then when we cannot do that, or when we're moving as staff and students, we wear masks and then do a lot of cleaning, including teaching kids to wash their hands. And that's more the approach that we've taken.
All right, great, thank you. All right, the next set of questions is more instructional in nature. So we had some questions about co-teaching and station teaching, and will we be able to do that with the need for social distancing? And if not, what is co-teaching going to look like? And so do you want to talk about that a little bit, Mike, or one of the principals?
Yeah, let's get a couple principals in on that. So maybe I'm going to call them Brian and Pam Shunk on that one. And before you two answer that, I'll say that my thought is we want to continue practices that we know are really effective. We may have to make some adjustments. Is the way I kind of process that. But Brian and Pam, if you all want to chime in on how you think that might work.
Well, and Nicole can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if the children have their masks on and the teacher does as well, then a small group situation could carry on fairly normally.
Yeah, we have, like I said, we have an advantage of having some additional spaces. So, I think we could carry on some of the traditional co-teaching things that we've done and some of those, alternate classrooms that we have. But my goal will be to get with my special education teachers and my teachers, talk about, what co-teaching looks like, what can we do, run it by our health coordinator, Nicole Brown, and talk to her and see what we can do. So come up with a plan, vet it, check it out. And if that doesn't work, let's come up with a new plan.
And on a side note, Nicole, with those gators, if through your research you find out that those are actually just as effective as a traditional mask, I'm wondering if that wouldn't be a preferred option with elementary kids because they can just pull them down and up, as they need them. My fear with masks and little kids is, that just go over the ears is setting them down and, somehow picking someone else's up accidentally or whatever. So as soon as you find something out, if you could let us know, that would be great.
Hey Pam, yeah, I will need to, look at some more research on those gator masks. I do like the idea for younger kids, as opposed to lanyards or that type of thing, because we wouldn't want them, dropping in the toilets and dragging them all over the schools. And so, yeah, I do like the idea that they could stay up higher on their bodies and that they could pull them upward. But they may get loose too as the day goes on. But I think that's something we're just going to have to look at and look into a little bit more before making a decision on that one.
Great. Thank you all for that. We did have several questions about after school programs, tutoring, students staying for makeup work, and I guess almost a remediation. I know that some of those questions came from the high school. They have lots of students who do that sometimes after hours. Will that be allowed?
We debated that back and forth during the month of June, and what we finally landed on, and actually Amy Bugg helped us get there, earlier this week actually, was we're going to have the after school program. We actually had that we weren't going to do that, but I think it was a good decision. It felt like one that everybody was in agreement to, so we're going to try to give that a go. So if you can give that a go, I think part of the logic too is if you're going to have extracurriculars, you're going to have sports, but you're not going to have an after school program, doesn't seem right. And then I would think, I would think the things they're describing there, you could do. I would just say you have to adhere to social distancing. You have to adhere to masks when needed, the same standards you would use during the school day.
Okay, thank you very much. There were some questions. This is not necessarily after school. This is more co-curricular, Mike, about specifically the high school and middle school. So Mark and Brian, if you would like to chime in. Band, choir, drama, some of those classes and teachers are itinerant. And with the facility at the middle school not being finished, will there be a plan of transporting students and using those facilities?
That's a good point. We have some really interesting spaces at the new middle school that probably could be used until the band room is finished. Brian, what is the plan for band, just as an example?
That's something we need to work on. I don't have a good plan in my head right now. So that's, we have space. I think there'll be a place for us to meet in the building. There's going to be some, like I said, there's some extra classrooms that we can utilize for band and a drama. So I think there'll be places, even though the theater's not finished and the band room's not 100% ready to go yet. I think that we'll have the spaces we need when school starts.
The new middle school's got an upstairs gymnasium of sorts. It's like a hybrid, you'd say, a dance studio / black box theater / it's got a gym floor in it. It's not as big as a gymnasium, obviously, but it's like a half court. If you can imagine half the size of a basketball court. It's something close to that. So I think Brian's going to be okay. He's just got to, maybe think through some things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question was actually several questions. Can students, if they are symptomatic or have to be quarantined, can they shift over to the virtual school, or how will that work? Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Mike?
I think that is how that will work. So if you've got, there's going to be, and this is where the flexibility comes in, right? So if we've got a student at Junction City Elementary, for example, in 3rd grade, and the health department says quarantine that classroom. So there's 22 kids in that classroom. They go on quarantine with their teacher. Teacher's fine, healthy. Only one child showing symptoms, but we've had to quarantine all those kids. That entire school goes essentially NTI, virtual school, for 14 days, and they all come back together. You could have other scenarios where the health department says we don't need to quarantine the classroom, just, there's these 3 kids. And so those 3 kids, maybe they go actually into the virtual school for a period of time. We would only be able to pull that off if the curriculum is literally nearly day by day that tightly, what the virtual school's doing, what the physical school's doing is that close together. So we'll have to figure that out. But yeah, there's going to be lots of different scenarios happen during the school year. And we have to be flexible enough, all of us, to handle all of those. And having a virtual school is going to be helpful to us, but you'll also have periods of time, I think, where a teacher who's teaching in the physical school will have to teach NTI virtual school for a period of time. I imagine that will happen also.
Great, thank you. And on that topic of virtual school, we did have a question about streaming, tripods, cameras available, technologies to live stream. We mentioned that in virtual school. Mike, do you want to talk about that at all, or would you like Susan or myself? Or
yeah, so we build a budget. Susan, you want to talk about? I mean, we're again, our goal is not to have that to be a simplistic approach. We're just going to stream that every classroom in the district in, and a kid can watch their classroom. That's not the goal, but we'll have some of that occurring. And so, Susan, you want to talk about how we'll pull that off?
Yeah, so we're, as Mike mentioned, we just created a budget for that. So we are currently in the research process. So you'll have things like a camera that will watch the teacher's movement, mics, lanyards. So just to give the best possible options for the experience in the classroom as well as the virtual to live stream those. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress. But yes, there will be equipment available to do it and do it right.
great, thank you very much. And I know, as Susan discussed, there'll be equipment. There also will be PD for people who will be giving instruction that way. The next question is really applicable to any school. Are we going to allow parents in the schools, for example? Can they come have lunch with their kids? What about on the first day of school? Can they walk their student to class? Can you just kind of talk a little bit about visitors and outside people in the schools?
Again, that'll be a school decision. But what I would say is that we would want to limit traffic. So I would think we would try to keep as many of the adults out of the building. Unless there's just obviously there will be parents who make their way into the office, will check their child out. But I would seriously think this year about simplifying that part of the entire process. And I think that's what, when I talk to principals, that's what I hear them saying that they're planning to do. I won't dictate from my office about that, but I would say I would simplify those processes, would be my suggestion to you, to all involved.
This kind of goes with safety drills and protocols. Will we have drills? And how will those be conducted?
I've not seen anything allowing a year off of drills. So I think that the laws that regulate how often you do fire drills, how often you do lockdowns, those would carry through this year. Certainly, we'll have to think through. I think you're going to have to put masks on when you do a lockdown. I don't think there's any question about that, because you can't social distance in that scenario. I would think we would only do the number of drills we have to do. I wouldn't think we would do, sometimes lockdowns we'd go above and beyond, right? I think you do the number of drills you have to do, but no more than that. But you're going to have to do them. I think there's knowledge on that. And I don't expect one, to be honest.
All right, this is, referring to outside of school. We mentioned visitors into the schools, but are we going to allow our students to go outside of school to take, let's say, dual credit classes or vocational schools? Again, that's a high school specific question.
Yeah, and Mark can chime in on that. My thinking on that, Mark, before you go there, is just that we would want to make sure where we're sending kids, they're also adhering to the guidelines we have to adhere to, which I'm sure they will be. But I would think you would do that. What's your thinking, Mark?
Hey, ask me again. I was responding to a question via text.
Stephanie?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, Mark.
Ask me again. I was responding to a question via text and didn't hear it.
Okay, so will students be allowed to go off campus to take, like, for example, BCTC dual credits or vocational school classes or anything that you all have RTIC agreements with?
My response to that is yes. I mean, we have to return to as normal as much as possible, but they still will be expected to, wear masks and observe social distancing where applicable. So yeah, there's no way that we can replicate some instruction in our building with the agreements we have with BCTC, with the vocational schools, perhaps with work release. So the answer is yes.
I will say that in the guidance, it does talk about field trips, and it advises against those kinds of things. Now, I think we can do field trips where we bring people to us. You know, if you want to do some kind of Shakespeare, a play, you bring the group to you, and you host that somewhere in the district or in your building. Rather than taking students to see it, you need to bring people to us. And then, as far as large assemblies of 850 students at the high school in the gym, that's advised against that as well. So really, you're just trying to simplify the year as much as you can. So a lot of what we're talking about is we're going to do the things we have to do that will ensure that our students are making progress instructionally. But some of the things we like to do that are also good for children, we may have to simplify some of those processes this year.
Great. We did have a question about shared resources. Some teachers are concerned about shared resource materials like pencil, crayons, but then is also like lab equipment. What are our views on shared resources?
That's a very good point. My thinking is where we can buy each student their own, we would want to do that. And if I need to be helpful in regards to that, let me know. I don't mind to supplement a school budget, within reason, I guess. I mean, to make that happen. Now, you're talking about lab equipment. So in a science classroom, I would think, so if you've got first period, these 4 students using this lab equipment gathered around, they've got to have their face masks on because social distancing is not occurring. And then what you would teach students is that, if they're touching the same surface, they've got to wash their hands before they touch their face. And then before the next group of students use that equipment, you would need to clean it all. So there's a lot involved in doing that. Anybody else want to respond to what I just said there?
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Many of the PPEs that they wear during labs, the goggles and things like that, if we cannot effectively sanitize them in a routine setting, then we would need to purchase more. Other than that, I feel pretty confident that most things can be sanitized. Our custodians continue to come up with plans to sanitize the building on any common areas. It also, reminds me to point out that any doors that can be left open in a safe way, in a safe manner, reduces the number of times that students need to touch that doorknob, would help out when spreading any kind of germs.
All right. You mentioned field trips, Mike, and so then that generated a couple more questions about competitive travel for co-curricular organizations. Or maybe after school speech and debate event or something like that. Can you elaborate on that specifically?
I think we would allow them to do what we're allowing athletics to do. So Kyle Wynn, what's the current guidelines, Kyle, regarding travel? I guess at the moment they're not allowing it. What are you hearing about travel and athletics at the moment?
To be honest, we haven't heard a whole lot on the travel end of side, just whether we're starting back up. I've been kind of doing double duty right now, listening to the KHSA working session this morning. And got one want to say hi. Say hi. I want to say hi to Mark. I want to say hi to Mark. Mark's a celebrity.
That's good.
They're actually discussing right now what the next few weeks will look like, and they'll I want to say hi to Mark. So hey, hi. Not here. that they'll, I think if we're playing sports and they're moving on, that they're going to allow it. But that was kind of one of my questions as well for KHSA is, we're talking about no field trips. Are they considering a game a field trip? Which if we're having sports, obviously one team has to travel to the next team. So I haven't heard any of that guidance. I think later in July is when we're hearing what the fall sports will actually look like, and we'll have more information at that time.
I think where competitive situations differ from a field trip is, a field trip, a lot of times you're taking students into an uncontrolled environment in terms of, I know field trips, sometimes the students will end up at the mall, at the food court, or they'll end up at some kind of a public venue, and it's hard to control that situation. But when you're talking about, Boyle County football traveling to Mercer County, well, Mercer County schools are doing the exact same things we're doing. So those are controlled environments. And I would think most of our other academic competitive situations would be more like that. So I would just say you follow the KHSAA guidelines is what you would do for academic team and those kinds of things.
That's correct. Yes.
All right, great answers. Thank you. The next few questions are, very much about the school day and the functionality of a school day. And the first question is recess and PE or physical education classes. What will those look like? Again, recess I know is predominantly an elementary question, but physical education classes are across the district.
Let's get a couple of principles on that. Like, I'm not saying we have to be the finish line, what we're thinking about recess and PE, but let's get maybe Bernice and Jenna to talk about what they're thinking about recess and PE right now.
Hey, this is Bernice. Definitely we can do some things again. If we maintain our social distancing, then the kids don't have to wear the mask. So we can do some things definitely outside, utilize some outside spaces, do some markings on the ground. Same thing within the gym, have some markings and spaces where the teachers work with the kids there. Recess, I know I've been, you've sent out, Mike, as well as reading some things about where we might section off the playgrounds and different spaces. Same thing, just utilize our spaces, make sure that the kids have within the classroom that they maintain that 6 feet and or they wear their mask. But I think that we've got enough spaces around the building and the outside spaces in order for that to take place.
And I'll mimic what Bernice is saying. I completely agree. Physical activity is, crucial for students to be able to get up and move and just have that physical activity overall. But I would say that we will do the same. We'll have some markings in the gym where they can social distance, but still do the activities. Lots of activities are coming out as far as how to social distance in a PE room. And I'm sure our PE teacher is working on those currently. And then as far as the playground, we'll have a rotation where students aren't on top of each other, can properly social distance, but still have a normalcy as far as recess and being able to, we may have to wipe down some equipment in between, depending on the usage, but we'll make it work and we'll do the best we can for our students.
Hey, so we're going to do 3 or 4 more questions. Before we do, though, Bobby Leffy's on the call, and I want Bobby to be able to, he's another, he's our alternative school principal. I want him to be able to speak to the school year real quick. So Bobby Leffy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Favors. We've already started school. We started this week. We had our first Zoom meeting with students. We're starting with the NTI process, and we're also starting with a new online program that we've taken into action this year. So it's going to be a little different, as all the principals are saying, but we're looking forward to it. It is going to be a process, and it's going to be a learning process as that. But it's just going to be all hands on deck. Our staff's already working, trying to figure out how we get students, and that's what I've been doing this morning too. While we're listening here, is working with students on getting them enrolled into this new online program.
That's good, Bobby. I think what he says is exactly right. So we've got about 3 or 4 more questions coming. and then we'll close it up. And again, if you ask a question, we don't get to it, we're gonna make note of it. You know, I've got a meeting on Monday with principals, and we're going to actually take a school from beginning to end and play out how it's going to function. So we're going to focus on one of the 3 elementary schools in the morning and play it out, you know, from the time kids get on the bus until the time they leave. And we're going to do either the middle school or the high school in the afternoon. So you're going to give us ideas that we haven't thought of. Probably there'll be some things we haven't considered yet, is what we're hoping. And then that way we can troubleshoot those in the next few days.
All right, thank you. The next question is about breakfast and lunch. So since students are going to get directly off the bus or as a car rider out of their vehicle and go straight to their classroom, will breakfast be served or offered in the classroom?
I think the answer to that's going to be yes. Katie's not on this call though. Katie will be in on the afternoon call with the parents. But I think the answer to that question is there'll be some kind of grab and go option, I imagine. I think that's how that would work. But again, we'll need to get Katie to speak to exactly what she's planning there. I know Katie is thinking through food service, every detail at a very high level. So I'm confident in what she's doing. I don't want to speak for her, but I believe that's how that works.
Okay, great. This one may need to be deferred to principals, but people are very curious what lunch will look like, lunchtime.
Mark, why don't you tell us what you think the high school lunch will look like?
Well, I know that we have talked about a couple different scenarios, and we haven't really landed on what will look like yet. We've looked at releasing classes to lunch every so many minutes, and then ensuring social distancing in the cafeteria. But I'm not so sure that our cafeteria can hold everyone and socially distance. So we're thinking about eating in the room. We're thinking about getting other areas like partitioning parts of the lobby off. And so we haven't landed on what we're going to do yet. That is one of my concerns.
That's a tough one because you got to teachers still by law get a duty-free lunch. So that's a tough one there, and it really is. Pam Shunk, what are you thinking about lunch?
Okay, well, I'm trying to carry on with our typical lunch schedule, but just stretch out the times. My problem is that we have round tables and they seat 8 kids. I've came up with one schedule where I only put 3 kids at each table as opposed to filling them up like we normally do. And that's workable, but the problem is that the kids face each other. And they are, 2 of them who are directly across from each other would be 6 feet, but then that third kid would be like around 5 feet. So that may or may not work. And then I was toying with the plexiglass, if we just cleaned it, and did the 3 kids at each table, but I don't know that that's going to work either. So long story short is I'm still working on it.
And you can see, some of these things are complicated. We don't have all the answers today. It's only July 10th. That's one of the reasons we extended the start of school is we're working out some things like this. You can hear Mark and Pam talk about what their thinking is currently. We're going to play a lot of that out on Monday when we take a school from beginning to end. We're going to play a lot of these details out as well. And then also on July 24th, we know how many students will be at Junction City or Boyle County High School. That's going to be a powerful piece of information as well, right? So if it's just a few kids in the virtual school, lunch is going to be tough. But if it's a bunch of kids in the virtual school, lunch gets a lot easier, but then the virtual school becomes more difficult. So, some of this is still to be played out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. You mentioned virtual school. So I'll ask the last question that's really related to that. With the virtual school, will we have, and you covered this, but we just kind of discuss it a little bit more in detail. Will teachers have teaching schedules that include traditional school and virtual school? And if they get numbers on July 24th, when will teachers know their master schedule for teaching and rosters of students?
We plan to have, so as far as the timeline, we plan to have 2 major work days on the Monday. So that would be the 27th and the Friday, the 31st, and then final plans on August 4th. So I think by that time, we for sure will know all the answers to the questions. Now, in terms of how you'll be staffed there, it depends just on the numbers, right? So if we have district-wide, 30 first graders, I mean, I think the smarter thing to do is figure out how to have 1 first grade teacher. And then, so that just depends on the numbers. If we have 5 first graders district-wide, it makes no sense to do that. So I think we've got to wait on the numbers to know how we would play it out. I think there's a great likelihood that you'll have that Brian and Mark will have to go to their science, social studies, math, and English language arts teachers and ask 1 or more of them to give up a period or 2 periods a day to the virtual school. Maybe not every teacher's having to do that, but some of them are. And certainly if you're one who wants the flexibility or doesn't mind the flexibility of trying to do both, I think you let them know that that would be encouraging for them to know people are willing to do that. That's what the stipend's for. The stipend's for people who are having to work in both environments all year, because we know that's going to be difficult. Look, the whole year is going to be difficult for many reasons, but that's just an added difficulty for someone who's having to juggle the wording that person uses, the traditional school and the virtual school at the same time. It's kind of piling that difficulty on top of all the other things we're having to figure out. So I think that's how it works. But again, July 24th, once we know how many kids, that's the big deal.
Great, thank you. So 2 questions left. The last one is preschool start date. Will it be moved back, and do you have that date?
We just hired a new preschool director, Chelsea Clark, yesterday. So I don't know how many people know that, but Jenna Blair, until just a few weeks ago, was the preschool director. So Jenna, what's the current planning there as far as preschool?
I'm actually working with Ms. Clark. We're trying to wait on guidance from KDE to see if anything's going to limit our start date. But in talking with Chelsea, and she expressed too, we want to get it started as close to the start of school as possible due to childcare, because it puts a strain on parents to try to find childcare. But we also have to have a transition week for these students by KDE policy. So we probably will start maybe the first week of September after we get them transitioned. And we also want to stagger a little bit from the regular school getting back into session because of busing and just figuring out how our students are going to stagger in. And so if we add 187 more kids across the district into the pool of the number of students already coming to school, we just want to make sure we make it the best for everyone. And so as close to the start of the year, but Chelsea will make that final decision per KDE policy.
Thank you, Jenna, and welcome, Chelsea. Last question, Mike, and actually this is not a question, it's more of a statement or a concern. We have several comments about temperature checks on buses, a lot of concern about students not getting their temperature taken before they get on a bus or when they get on the bus, and the spread of COVID on buses. Is that something that we could reconsider or include in our guidance? And you can choose to look into it, or you can elaborate however you'd see fit.
Yeah, I think Chris Holderman and his team, Jamie at the bus garage, they'll make decisions about that. We did approve the hiring of 15. What was the naming you gave for those people? Carla Carr at the board meeting on Tuesday night.
Health and safety assistants, temporary
Temporary health and safety assistants for this school year. 15 of those people. We could certainly use them if we want to check for temperatures. We could put them on our buses to supplement our monitors, because you need 2 people if you're going to do that. But then that takes those people out of your buildings, because right now we think they could be pretty helpful there as well. So there'll have to be some decisions like that made. We have a good amount of money in the bank, but it's not endless amount of money. And this is going to be an expensive school year, there's no doubt. So, we're going to have to be smart about it. We can't do everything, but we can do a lot of things that would be effective. So ultimately, Chris and Jamie have to make that call. And I do hear what the person's saying. The point they're making is a valid one. But that's how that would be decided. Well, that's the last question. I want to say thanks to everyone who tuned in today. I want to thank Susan Taylor and Matt Whitlock behind the scenes for making this thing go. On the call, you had Nicole Brown, Kyle Wynn, Amy Bugg, Stephanie Wade, Carla Carr. You had our 6 principals, Bobby, Brian, Jenna, Bernice, Pam, and Mark. It's going to be a challenging year, but in challenging times, opportunities arise. Opportunities to try things instructionally you haven't been able to try before, to learn how to use tools to help kids. It's going to be a challenging time, but one that that has opportunity for us as well. And so I appreciate everybody who's tuning in, all the staff. You're the ones that make this thing go for our kids. We appreciate you. Together, we're going to get through this, and we'll make this a significant year for our kids in a really positive way. Email me, call me if you need anything. I know the others on the call would say the same thing. Everybody have a great day.